If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Sun Tzu's Art of War.
We are in the middle of right-out cyber war, but we simply don't see it really that way. And that's because, as opposed to conventional war, it's not people that are primarily victims here, because it's IT systems. And like Sun Tzu said, know your enemy. And that's quite difficult in this case, but we're going to give it a shot anyway. Thank you for joining. My name is Lieuwe Jan Koning, and from the Security Operations Center floor here at Onto It, we bring you Threat Talks. And the subject of today is cyber warfare. Let's get onto it.
Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity.
Let me introduce my two guests of today. On my left side, it's Luca Cipriano. He's a threat intel specialist at Onto It. And he is going to explain us about all these attacks as you're used to. Luca,
yes.
Against how many countries do you actually defend yourself on a day-to-day basis?
All of them. I don't trust anybody.
Guy with trust issues. Martijn Peijer, he is a cybersecurity analyst at the Security Operations Center of the Dutch Tax Office. Welcome. Who will win this cyber war, you think?
I don't think there's any winners in warfare, but I would root for the west side.
You'll be on the west. Yeah,
yeah,
you have
the western side.
Okay, yeah. Well. Apart from this, in this episode, what can you expect? Well, we're gonna explain who is attacking, what we know about it, how these attacks happen. It's going to be about APTs, for example. And we have a few case studies, a few attacks that we're going to deep dive in briefly in this episode. In the follow-up episodes, in the deep dives, we're going to really dive deep in those. Very interesting to learn all about that. And those are the China Nexus Barracuda Hack, the Russia GRU Viasat Hack, and APT Sand Eagle Operation Triangulation. It's a mouthful. And actually we dubbed them James Bond, Ethan Hunt, and Jason Bourne. And it will become clear why. And of course, we're going to talk about what you're going to do about this. If you are an organization, who do you hire? What do you need? What kind of solutions can we provide to you? And of course, there's going to be a threat hunt where you can win a t-shirt. Gentlemen, once again, welcome. First of all, I mean, we have these names, Operation Triangulation. It reminds me of Operation Desert Storm, Operation Overlord, Operation Enduring Freedom. It really feels like war terms, eh?
Oh, it is war. It's cyber warfare. So
yeah, or is this a couple of nerds coming up with cool names with the help of ChatGPT?
I guess both of them. They're nerds for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so we know a lot about this subject, and that's because of a thing we call CTI. Luca, what's that?
Well, with CTI, we intend cyber threat intelligence. We aim on gathering, collecting, analyzing, and sharing data about potential threat and existing threat that company may face. What we also try to do is to learn about the threat landscape. So we try to learn the techniques and tactics that these attackers use to guide, for example, incident response efforts that can help speed up the process. And this, we do it by studying APTs. One of those things that's
APT. That's another term, Martijn. Maybe you can help out. What does that mean?
Yeah, APT stands for Advanced Persistent Threat. So basically, first of all, they're advanced, which means they're not your average script kiddie, but most of the time they're government state-backed hackers. They're persistent, which means they're usually inside your network for a couple of months before they actually do anything. And while threat speaks for itself, it's a threat, of course.
Yeah, we will find it. Well, let's start with the first case study that I mentioned in the introduction. China Nexus Barracuda Hack, for example. Luca, can you help us out a little bit?
Sure.
What's so advanced and so persistent about this thing?
Well, this is going to be a nice one for the deep dive. We're going to discuss this in depth later. As Martijn just mentioned, APTs, they stay for longer times, like trying to be stealthy and silent in the network. And this is what happened. For example, for this attack, there was a zero-day vulnerability in Barracuda appliances, which are email gateway. They scan the email for spam viruses, and there was a vulnerability in how the tar files, so the archives, were processed, and some code passed from the file name.
Already sounds like a deep dive. It's going to go even deeper.
Yeah,
I'm
we're
afraid.
going to go even deeper.
But just who is I mean, you said Russia was in there, so was Russia the attacker?
China.
Oh, sorry, China. Yes.
It's
We'll
okay.
talk about Russia in a minute.
We're going to talk about Russia as well.
Yeah. So this is China. How do you know China?
Well, we know China for a few reasons. So one of the reasons is that the Mandiant noticed a decrease in attempts to exploit during the Chinese New Year. So that was quite suspicious. But also thanks to CTI and learning about techniques and analyzing the code, we know that some similarities in the malware and the backdoor that they used with other attacks that happened before.
Yeah, so CTI tells us China here is attacking.
And also infrastructure. The infrastructure was used already by other attackers from China. So you do 1 plus 1.
And the victim is in the West.
Yeah.
Europe, America, Canada.
Yeah, as well. This was really espionage. They used it to, sneak into the mail. So it was really about information. They didn't really...
So they didn't, they were really a spy like indeed James Bond, getting information.
Yeah.
And reading with them, trying to stay there as long as possible.
Yes.
But not necessarily bringing stuff down.
No, exactly.
Not their target.
You don't want that because otherwise you get detected. So
yeah, what I learned about when we pre-discussed this about in the end, the boxes needed to be RMA'd because they were broken beyond repair, and you got a new one, and then what happened?
Yeah, don't spoil the surprise for the deep dive. They had an extra Easter egg persistent method in the
that survived
backups.
Replacing the device. That's crazy. That's really advanced. That's
really advanced.
That's what you meant?
Yeah, that's what I meant. And persistent.
Yes, indeed. So tell us a little bit about the groups that are behind this and about the agencies that do this. Apparently,
yeah. So this attack was probably from China. They have their own APTs, of course, but lately they've been also trying to hire security firms. They're trying to get external companies to work for the government so they can have more time for other things, which we saw also with the I-S00N leaks. Which was from also a private cybersecurity firm, and they were hired by the state of China to do some hacking and some other kind of things. What we learned from the leaks is that someone posted it on Github. It was a lot of documentation, files, everything about what they delivered, and apparently they hacked into a couple of European and also other Asian countries. And they also delivered backdoors for iPhones, also hardware to get into Wi-Fi networks, for example.
Yeah, so the soldier toolbox, right? They
like a toolbox, for communication, which encrypted communication to China as well for agents overseas. So we learned a lot of that from that, of course, a lot of intelligence. And which was also happening a few days later. The post was offline from Github. So maybe China got to him.
Company.
A Western company, but GitHub is also in China. They have like thousands of people there as well because it's owned by Microsoft. So maybe the Chinese government went to the Chinese Microsoft and said, "Hey, you have to take this offline."
And you have a copy?
It was not there.
I have a copy. Yeah.
Nice. Can we put it in the show notes?
Yeah. I always make a local copy of these kind of things in my spare time.
you need to be fast with this kind of things because they can go down.
Always checking Twitter or X and trying to.
We'll provide a link for if you want. That's probably the deep dive. Yeah. By the way, there's gonna be infographics available for those free attacks. So if you want to know more, use them in your internal presentations in your company. Feel free to use them. That's why they're there. So enjoy them. All right. So it's really like a whole business, a government business. Like it's huge, and that's why they can be that advanced, probably.
So on the same topic about leaks, we did have the same about Russian. There was the same thing that happened with I-S00N. It happened to a Russian company as well. It was NTC Vulcan, which was a security contractor, and they also leaked a lot of files and information. I think it was about 5,000 pages of documents. This happened when the war in Ukraine started. Somebody in the company that was against the war that decided to leak this information to a German newspaper. And we learned a lot about that as well. They had, like, for example, aside from tools for vulnerability scan, but they had also a tool called AIMSIT-V that it was used for misinformation campaigning on social media, which it's also like distributing fake news, and in this way you can also like influence elections and things like this.
You can also put that under cyber warfare because it's information warfare.
It is indeed. They actually had about cyber warfare. They had a tool called Crystal 2V, and it was basically a platform to teach about OT, IoT devices hacking, and they had like things about blocking access to a global information system, railway and air. So how to bring down all these kind of things, and based on the real actual OT devices that they use. So they're really learning and teaching how to cyber warfare.
And that got out by accident or so? Or
No.
official government?
It was a whistleblower. Mm-hmm. They say that probably he was against the invasion in Ukraine, therefore leaked the documents from this
So the reason we know about this is all this CTI research that the world is doing, and some companies that have employees that can't live with this. I mean, the weak points seems to be a little bit.
Well, it is
if you
up
hire
to people like us to get this information, make sure that they don't disappear.
But it teaches a tremendous amount of knowledge on how this works, and I mean, there's the MITRE ATT&CK framework, of course, and I always like the mitigation framework, which is if you're in cyber defense, really important to. It's nice to know how people attack, but then you can stay there and look at your log files. Oh, we got attacked, and that's not what what you should do. In the end, you should make yourself more robust against those. But this framework is that fueled also by this kind of research, huh? So you can look up what they're doing there. Is that
you can use it for both offensive or defensive methods, of course. You have the attack navigator. You have all the TTPs in there.
It's really good, the attack navigator.
You can use it on the defensive side, of course. You can check you can click on an APT and see what kind of TTPs they use. So you can defend against it.
Suppose I am a financial institution, and how can I use this? And I'm a CISO. How can I use this attack navigator?
Yeah, so you would just go to the MITRE website, go to the attack navigator. You would look at what kind of threats you would have. So if you're a financial institution, the biggest threat is probably ransomware companies and people trying to steal financial data. So those kind of threat actors you're going to look at. And then when you click on them, you can see the TTPs that they use. And then you can...
Then you can wonder, okay, this is the stuff I want to prevent.
Yeah.
Do I have the controls in place that make that more...
And usually they have a SOC, so they have a blue team and they can... At defensive measures.
This is also important because assuming that you get hacked and you have some indicator of compromise, you can tie them to a specific attacker, and maybe you can also know the next step what they are. So it can help you also in the middle of a crisis know where you should focus your defenses, how you should help limit the blast radius, what they're going to do next, but also what is their target.
And this is different from company to company because you mentioned banks, that's probably ransomware. Mm-hmm. But suppose I am ASML, for example. We're talking about a China threat. I mean, it becomes geopolitical now. Mm-hmm. The ASML is banned by the Americans to sell to China because they're afraid that they get too many AI chips, and that's where the foreseeable future is going to be really important, right?
Yeah.
Then if you are a company like that and you know where your IP is, then you also would go...
Yeah, so if you're ASML, you have a different kind of threat. Exactly. That's cyber espionage or normal espionage as well, of course. And maybe insider threats as well. Maybe people indeed from China, for example, trying to get into your company and then trying to leak information from the inside. And cyber espionage is a big threat as well.
Most Chinese employees are probably... You want to have their expertise, but there might be a few that work for the government. Then.
Yeah, that's hard. So you would have to have a good screening process as well.
Yeah, that's
could be also tough. A Western person that needs money. not necessarily somebody.
And you should monitor all the network traffic going out, of course, out of the company.
Yeah. In the deep dive, we're probably gonna come back on that how you make sure that. Eventually, indeed, the data needs to get out, and that's usually a place where you can.
Yeah.
See, at least detect a lot, and also prevent a lot if you are properly configuring your defenses.
Of course, it can also be physical, like an employee downloading the files and then printing them and taking them with them. So you would have to have different kinds of monitoring
Yeah.
Actually,
available.
we did a threat talk the other day about robbing a bank that way, and that was by
Yes, that was
Jason.
funny.
Actually, his is on record of robbing a bank was 15 seconds. That was amazing. If you missed that episode, go look at the history. It's amazing. It's a mix of physical and digital that shows a weak point. And it's here as well, applicable as well.
Yeah, indeed.
All right. Hey, it's time for a treasure hunt. I'm going to mention a code, and it's in screen also. If you send that to code@threat-talks.com, you will get a very cool T-shirt. Actually, the T-shirt that Luca is wearing today, not that actual one.
Not this one, maybe different.
But the same print. So please send it to us. The code is 082406. Good luck. Actors, we already discussed a little bit. It's important to understand what they do. And what I've heard you say is, it's nice to know what techniques they use, so then we can defend ourselves against that. And the other thing is, once you've seen the first step and you understand who does it, you can predict the next step. So that's nice in remediation or and since these APTs are there for so long, typically, it's good to know. How can we use this in our decision making? If I am a CISO, for example, and because my point is, we can do for an individual company to do threat intel. I get that, and to look at those things. But I always think, there's so little you can do compared to the world. I mean, there's Patch Tuesday. If you as a company had to figure out each and every individual leak that they patch. Well, that takes a zillion people, right? That's impossible.
Of course, that's impossible. It also depends on how large your organization is, of course. If you have thousands of people, you would really need to have a dedicated CTI team within your SOC, for example. But still, collaboration is important. And you would need to have a lot of different intelligence feeds. So you would have to buy them or get them from other parties. And then harvest all that information and analyze it. And also depending, of course, on what kind of company you are. So if you're in a financial institution, like I said, you would need to monitor for ransomware organizations, for example. ASML would need to check for cyber espionage groups.
So the only thing you would do yourself is if you're really big and really tailored to your use case, to the data that you are protecting for your specific organization. Right? Because, for example, ransomware, to me, there's no value in knowing how ransomware works. Reason is, I know it's there. I don't care if the Russians, the Chinese, our own government, I don't care, or some script kiddie. I need defense. Yeah. So the way I look at it is I go to the MITRE ATT&CK framework and then the mitigation framework, and I know your enemy, right?
Yeah.
The enemy is the sum of all the potential enemies that are out there. So that's the whole MITRE framework.
I think there's also more because, as Martijn mentioned, you need to be also up to date with the CVEs, the 0 days, the vulnerabilities, and especially the IOCs, the feeds. The feeds, it takes a lot of time. You need to have like for example, what we do. We have our own feeds, and we have.
You mean we as a company servicing other companies?
Yes, we as actually what I do together with my colleague. Yes, it's we take the feeds, but we also score them by how reliable they are, because it's not that you get like random feeds everywhere. So you need to also make sure that you have always new feeds up to date, and that you also have a reliability score in place, so that you can just check how they do and if they're good or not, if you want to include other feeds or remove some that don't provide. So it's a lot of work. It's just
it's a crazy amount of work. I mean, the guys here are doing this. You are now here, but this morning you were doing that, right?
Yeah, of course.
So but it's impossible for most organizations, I would say, to do that themselves.
No, I think you should outsource that unless you're a big company.
And for the specific one. But you also outsource the threat intel. You buy the threat intel feeds, for example, right?
That's possible. But you could also completely outsource it. Of course, if you're a smaller company, you could hire a SOC, hire a threat intel team, and they can do it for you.
Yeah. But the important part is somehow CTI needs to be in the mix, otherwise you will miss the APTs and especially those nation-state attacks.
Yeah, if you don't have any intelligence, then...
you will bring a knife at a gunfight, basically, without it.
Exactly.
So guys, we talked about a few attacks. Do you have any other examples of how these things work, what we've seen in the real world? I mean, must be countless ones. Huh?
Yeah. Well, another thing that we learned a lot from, like with the I-S00N leak, of course, there's another big leak that probably a lot of people have heard of.
So I-S00N again is Chinese, huh?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have the Conti leaks, which is also a really big collection of information. And Conti was a ransomware gang. They were also part of an APT, Wizard Spider. They're based in Russia. And what we learned from the Conti leaks, like the ransomware source code was in there, so also decryption keys and everything, but also a lot of chat logs, hundreds of thousands of chats between all the members. And if you would analyze them, which a lot of threat intel analysts have done, you can also read it online everywhere, of course, is that there's a lot of ties between the Conti ransomware group and the Russian intelligence agencies and Russian government. Like they even went to an FSB headquarters and they physically met there. So the ransomware guys together and also the FSB guys together.
So more evidence that there's a complete industry behind it.
Yeah.
Also, Russia is a bit lenient in law until you don't attack a Russian-based company.
Yeah.
So they don't really care if you break havoc outside Russia.
Yeah.
So it's a bit easier for them.
Yeah, we talked about the booters last time.
Yeah.
They are predominantly hosted in Russia, and there's nothing really you can do except cut off Russia from the internet.
Yeah, but also like we just discussed, the security firms in China that are working together with the Chinese government. In Russia, it's the ransomware gangs working together with the Russian government. Another example from the leaks is that also a government official asked Conti to hack a Bellingcat journalist who wrote about the poisoning of Navalny. Also some communication about working together with the GRU, which is the military intelligence agency of Russia, and trying to take down systems and also trying to steal information about the COVID-19 vaccine, which was back in 2020, I think.
Why isn't this in the news all the time? Because it sounds like really like Russia has and China for that matter as well. They're constantly attacking everything they can, and it's not. I mean, it's not an Article 5 thing for the NATO, for example, under attack. It doesn't fall into that. It's not a physical act, but it sounds like it's SS.
Well, it is in the news. It depends which news you follow.
Yeah,
in the news that we
cyber
follow,
news.
we read it.
But that's why you guys are here to tell the rest of us.
But I think the also the reason is that we still nowadays we have this vision that the cyber world is really completely detached from the real world. But we need to really start to think that they are the same things. So it's like the actual hacks, they have real life consequences. So that's what we should start to change our mind about it. It should be like the same as an actual.
Are we prepared as a nation,
against cyber attacks?
Yeah.
I don't really think so. Really good.
It depends
we can always do
what your enemy is. Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's get to the attack, the Russia GRU Viasat hack. We talked about Russia a couple of times. What they did, they brought down. Well, the attackee, the victim was was power.
Yeah.
Energy, the energy sector. Huh? If you bring that down,
it was a satellite.
No, it was satellites.
Okay, but they used it for to.
No, that's the thing is like so exactly. This is what I mentioned before, that hacks they have real world consequences, because one of the reasons why they realized that this was happening, it was because in Germany they lost connectivity, so they did lose. It's not that they did not work, but they lose just connectivities with the controls of windmills. So a lot of windmills were not reachable, but this was a consequence of an attack that was initiated just right at the same time that
but I
Ukraine
get it. But
was...
if your bigger plan is to bring down an economy or to make a land defenseless or a region.
So with Viasat, Russia invaded Ukraine, physically of course, but they also launched cyber attacks on, for example, on this satellite network, to take down all the communications for the military that were using this satellite system to communicate. Yeah,
because the victim was the satellite system itself, and that is an ISP. So if you want an internet connection, you can hire them, especially if you are in impossible places.
Yeah. Like an airplane, for example.
Airplane,
if you need internet on an airplane.
Starlink is the other obvious example for this, but this is a competitor then. Huh?
Yeah.
That broke down.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about this better in the deep dive. But what they did here, they managed to gain initial foothold in the company, in the Viasat, and then they uploaded a malware, a kind of malware on a lot of routers, which is a wiper, which basically destroyed the device, render inoperable. And aside, they also started a volumetric attack, DDoS, against the remaining part of the network that was up. And that effectively brought down.
But that means that a nation state, whether it's Russia, China, or any other, they can then apparently, by hacking a single company, make sure that a very important part of our infrastructure is down.
Yeah, of course.
And I don't think you're going to recover quickly if all those modems are down.
No.
I mean, you've got to physically go there. I mean,
No.
They had to have them shipped, and first of all, to understand what was happening, because then you need to study the device, why it went down, and then you see it's a malware. You need to reverse engineer. So that's.
And at the same time, the invasion was going on, so there was a lot of
keeps you busy. Yeah.
Yeah, there was
really
kind of busy there. Yeah.
And indeed, Germany was like one of the consequences that was not intended, but it brought down that communication. But it also brought down communication system in commercial flights. And
so, and you, how do we know this is Russia?
Well, the timing is quite
another
same
coincidence.
time, but also again starting the attack and learning the source code of the malware. So analyzing reverse engineering, there was like some similarities with malware used already.
Again,
in
a
other
combination.
And
of
actually,
when it happens.
Ukraine was the only target, but there was side damage in other countries and airline companies, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the difference between like a precision bombardment and on a city or so and cyber. I mean, you have to shoot the internet, right?
It's like a cluster strike.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Cluster
there's
bomb.
laws against that in the physical world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there are cyber warfare rules right now from the Red Cross, the rules of engagement. But I'm not sure if anyone's actually following these rules, like no civilian targets, stuff like that. No innocent
How can you
targets.
tell? Huh?
Yeah.
Well, don't hack a hospital, for example, like they did several times. Don't, or at least if you hack it, don't ransomware the hospital. At least steal the data. I mean, be a bit ethical about it, because I mean, you can kill people if you bring down a hospital. Like,
Let's not go into the ethical and war
no, exactly.
area. What can we do
Against satellite attacks.
Well, what can we do? Study, learn, prepare, do CTI, share with the community. Just create all this cyber threat intelligence.
Have a backup plan, maybe? I mean,
have a backup plan.
I hope the military has two different networks to communicate. They do, of course, at least.
Yeah, of course. I mean, especially if you're, I mean, one ISP can always go down. So if you have sensitive data that needs to be
not even because
available,
of attack.
No, it can happen also because of a hurricane or whatever somewhere else. So I mean, if you have infrastructure that need to be always online, at least have two ISPs. Like,
have a backup. If they had SpaceX already as like a second backup, for example, they could switch the communications.
Redundancy.
Yeah. Well, what I hear about the war in Ukraine is that the Ukrainians did get attacked a lot, but they also recovered really fast. Huh?
Yeah, they had a lot of help, of course, from also from Western intelligence agencies and stuff.
I think Starlink helped, right?
Yeah, also in the beginning they sent some equipment.
Yeah, there were couple of things that Starlink did. They also not helped explicitly, if I remember correctly, because they put Starlink on their bombs, for example.
Okay.
And so there was a guided missile
like
with
that.
Starlink headed towards Russia, and I think they shut down Starlink in parts of the sea or whatever. But it shows you how important tech is in everything, right?
Yeah, and there's satellites are also a really important target, of course, with these kind of attacks. We've also seen some signal hijacking a few months ago, also in the Netherlands. I'm not sure if anyone is watching baby TV.
Not on a regular basis. No.
It's not a big TV channel. It's a small TV channel, of course, for babies. But Russia was hijacking the signal of the satellite. So they actually sent Russian propaganda to the TV station, which you would see at your home then when watching TV, or your child would see when watching baby TV.
I remember I know someone who has a baby that watched. Well, it turned out to be I don't know if it was baby TV, but that baby wasn't yet talking. But then the first sounded a bit weird, like Russian.
Yeah.
And apparently the girl was moved from regular videos about I don't know Mickey Mouse or whatever towards a Russian version of it. So
Yeah.
and then of course the algorithm learned that, and she would.
That's how you get a sleeping agent.
Yeah,
And you would think like, why would Russia target a small baby TV station? But maybe it was just a test to see what they can do. And maybe later on they will actually try to get the biggest channels in the Netherlands and all European countries and hijack all the signals.
I think they suffered of it as well, right? A few after the war in Ukraine. I think Russia also had the same. That's I don't remember which hacking group was, but they managed to hack into the main television and stream like videos of the.
But if my goal was to influence elections or whatever, I would indeed try to hijack these streams, but not do it in an obvious way, more like an APT, and then change the video broadcast a little bit. For example, with AI, we can now do that. We can now have a trusted anchor saying weird things.
And that's part of the information warfare again, which is part of cyber warfare.
It's going to be a mess.
Yeah, you already had it, of course, in the history with radio stations, capturing the signals, hijacking the signals. But now we see it also with television and all the kinds of media, social media, a lot of fake news being spread.
Yeah, but then if there's a trusted person, I mean, I cloned my voice just for the kicks of it, right?
Yeah.
And I just type in stuff, and it's almost indistinguishable from myself.
So you never have to talk anymore. This podcast, you can just type it out.
This podcast is presented by AI.
Oh, I thought it wasn't obvious.
Yes.
No, but really, that's gonna have a big impact on these things. If you can get into those streams and do it like that. I had a presentation the other day, and I tricked someone into speaking to my microphone for a minute. I just needed 1 minute of audio. And then I had him say on stage really weird things.
So I'm going to say weird things on this podcast now.
Well, we are not actually recording this. We are just, since you work for the tax office, I'm going to record something that I don't have to pay taxes. That's the secret hidden agenda.
That's a big danger, and it's getting more realistic every day. So
So what can we do in general against these APTs? I mean, there's all those IOCs, all those intel. Once you have it, so we already mentioned a couple of things. Is there also something that we can do in prevention side? Because this APT's dwell time is so long. I mean, it's nice that we, when it happened, in hindsight, know what happened, and for the next same attack or similar technologies, we can predict what the next step could be. Although deception of war, again, they may take a different path. Ideally, it doesn't get that far.
No, so usually they're inside the network, like I said, for a couple of months. So if you would catch them in the beginning, that would be a lot easier, of course. You could monitor, for example, weird network traffic, IP addresses that are unknown, maybe in Russia as well. And that's also where CTI comes in again. Like Luca said, you're going to capture all these feeds, all this information. There's probably also IOCs like C2 service in there.
For sure. You need to have like dynamic feeds, and there are tools that helps. Like one is TEEPS, MISP. We have like different tools that can help sharing these IOCs. And
that's also a big part of your work, eh? To our own research and research from others. We combine those into a stream of IOCs, but we use them to defend.
You
in every firewall list of IPs that's very dynamic in nature.
You create dynamic lists, and the more updated it is, the more up to date it is, the better the chance that you're going to block something on an initial stage.
Yeah, and that's the most important.
Yes.
Hey guys, I want to talk one more subject with you guys, and that's we've been talking about the Russians and the Chinese. What about ourselves? Is the West also attacking?
Yes, of course, the West is attacking, but there's no official APTs that are connected to the West.
You said you would be on the side of the West, so apparently we're also good at this.
Yeah, of course, we have really good hackers in the West as well. Also the Western intelligence agencies, of course. But when you're looking at APTs, there's no official classifications, but we've seen that...
Not anymore. I mean, now, yes.
Yeah, we've seen that the Russian security firms have announced that their first Western APT, they dubbed it Sand Eagle, and they linked it to the American government. And Kaspersky also wrote about Operation Triangulation on that same day, and they also linked that to the APT Sand Eagle. Operation Triangulation is like a big operation which infected a lot of iPhones secretly.
Yeah, that's really sophisticated. We're gonna talk about this in a deep dive. It's gonna be quite complex to explain.
It's going to be a long episode, you expect?
Because the particular thing about this is that they actually used 4 different zero-day vulnerabilities, and already having one, it's a lot. They're expensive.
0 days in an iPhone are worth a
4
lot.
and
they have
chained
4
together. Yeah.
Yes.
And do you need them all 4?
Yes, you need them all 4. I guess that if the most important probably is the first one, first and second, then probably if the 4th got blocked, maybe they could have other ways to still achieve the target. I think the first 3 are the most important probably. But yeah.
And the first one was again the initial access. They would send an iMessage which was hidden, so you wouldn't notice it on your phone, and it had an attachment, and that would actually execute code and get their initial foothold in your iPhone.
Yeah. And once they're the chaining all these vulnerabilities, then they were able to download a spyware, Triangle DB, I think they dubbed it or something.
Yeah,
Triangle DB, yeah. And then from there, you have a spyware, so you can get the data.
And an iPhone is a really closed, usually secure system. It's not like I can log onto it and check out what processes are running.
No,
it's completely hidden.
No, because for jailbreaked iPhones it's easy, of course, but this worked on non-jailbreaked iPhones, and that's really rare. Usually you see a lot of Android malware, but not iOS malware.
Jailbreaks the iPhone.
Yeah.
and can you give some idea on how difficult it is to do this? I mean, it's 4 0 days. I mean, that's a lot of research. It's just a crazy amount of effort.
You would have to have a lot of knowledge and a lot of people.
A lot of knowledge, and I would actually maybe even say somebody in the inside, maybe, because that's really.
Well, we know that the Russians do it, and we know that the Chinese do it. We just kept it a better secret. Looks like.
Yes.
Potentially, yeah.
I'm not gonna go in that direction, but yeah, I mean.
Next time you are
then
at the TSA,
they're gonna pick me up at home.
They're gonna have an investigation. Yeah.
But that was extremely sophisticated.
Yeah.
So a message that sends a script, and what was the second or the first? Can you name another one?
We're gonna discuss it in the deep dive in depth. I can mention the last maybe 0 day. It was Safari. So Safari had a common injection, and it was so the trick was visiting a special web page that will trigger a code injection, and then with that they actually also checked if the device was the correct device that was visiting the website, so some sort of authentication, and then installed the spyware. There was one
Most
thing.
of us lost him already. Let's get into the deep dive.
You asked for it. You asked for it. I said it was really sophisticated.
Yeah, it's also really technical attack.
It's really technical, yes. But there was one thing that could have prevented it, kind of. It will be if you have your phone in iPhone, you can put it in lockdown mode. And the lockdown mode would have blocked for sure the first CVE, the first 0 day, and probably also the last one. So you could have maybe with a phone in lockdown mode.
And you only need to block the first one because that's the initial access.
Yeah, exactly.
So would you then recommend organizations to always use, for business phones, to always block your iPhone?
It's difficult because it's a big impact on
so
user.
what doesn't work anymore if you do that? Is there a way, can you try it and then undo it?
Yeah, of course.
Does that work?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
we should probably all do this.
Yeah, you can find it in your iPhone settings.
Well, my iPhone is in lockdown mode, but I use it only for work. So for me, it does not have any impact.
Do you have a second phone for your banking apps?
That's the third. Should be the third phone.
Third phone.
I don't
Not
have
yet,
the third.
not
No,
yet.
my main phone is also for banking app.
I'm referring to an earlier episode of Threat Talks with Jason E. Steele. He said, I have the solution for this all, and just get yourself a second phone just for banking stuff. No internet on it, no SIM card in it, nothing. You just use your other phone's Wi-Fi if you want to do a banking transaction. All your financial apps should be on there, nothing else. So you cannot receive a message like this. Also, you don't even need lockdown mode for that.
Yeah, that's smart.
Exactly. Yeah. How many phones do you have?
Too many. I can't count. I throw it away after every transaction.
They're all burner
phones.
All burner phones.
So lockdown mode. Then what's the disadvantage? You said we are able to switch it on, and just to try what's happening, to see how useful it is for you and switch it off later. It's probably recommended for everyone to do it. Why not? Well, maybe that's the question. Why not?
It's going to block some features that you probably usually use on your own iPhone. I'm not exactly sure which features.
It might have impact. I don't know all of them, but for sure you will have problem loading some remote content from web servers or from email, or you won't receive.
Yeah, so I won't see
video
my
calls from.
So my newsletters won't show images, or
stuff
like that.
For
Some
not
images.
all, but some.
I think it also blocks like Bluetooth communication
Yes.
and AirPlay and stuff like that. All those.
Like something that, for example, you can't automatically log in Wi-Fi networks. So there's no auto login every time you need to select the Wi-Fi network.
Yeah.
So far, I like the features of the lockdown mode.
I think they created it for journalists and government officials and people like that.
If you're part of Bellingcat, you have to have it. If you're in the government, you have to have it. Local government have to have it.
It limits your phone.
Yeah. One thing that I saw is that you cannot have shared pictures anymore. So if you're sharing it in your family in iCloud, then it doesn't work. So that's a disadvantage for some.
Yeah.
Well, we should all try it and see if we can live without it, and that would be much better. Gentlemen, thank you very much. There's a lot to wrap up on, actually. First of all, we haven't seen half of it. And you have maybe seen 10% of it, but the rest of the world has seen very, very little, and it's real. It's really a threat that we should put front and center much more maybe in politics, but also in our day-to-day life and in how we invest in cyber security and in defense there. And CTI plays a very important role. If you're big, do it yourself, but certainly make sure you at least hire some service to get this done. I think we can all agree on that as well. And for remediation, if you know the next step,
yes,
that's really, really helpful. And go check out the MITRE threat navigator, right?
Yeah, and again, I think it's cheaper to invest before than after. So invest money before something happened, because then you need to deal with the downtime, you need to deal with the lost business, you need to deal with the recovery and everything. So
Probably ransom money as well.
ransom money.
So
and you can have insurance, but that brings you a legal battle with your insurer on whether they will cover it or not.
Instead of paying for ransom insurance, you could also pay for people.
Exactly.
Monitor.
and firewalls and segmentation.
Yeah.
All that. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. We have some infographics, as I already explained, are in the show notes. They talk about the three threats that we discussed briefly today. In the following weeks from this episode, we will have deep dives on all three of them. So be sure to check those out as well. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you saw, please like us. It will help us spread the word further. And press the subscribe button, because that makes sure that you will see those next episodes in your inbox appearing automatically. And if you have any feedback, we'd love to hear from you. team@threat-talks.com. And from the Security Operations Center floor here at Onto It, I thank you very much once again and hope to see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by Onto It Cybersecurity and M6. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.